Hey everybody, we're back. We're back on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Day 5. We're closing it out. It's the afternoon session. We got one more session, an evening session tonight. We have about at least a dozen shows coming up for the rest of the night. We have so many great guests. We got a great one coming up here at 1 o'clock Eastern time. I got to change my schedule here. 1 o'clock Central time. We have Misery Point Radio, then 1:30 Soul Forge podcast. Then at 2 o'clock, we were teasing it up during my show. It's the Indie Pods Award Ceremony. 3 o'clock is the Orange Recliner Chronicles. 3:40 is Scott Curtis Comedian. And then at 4:30, wrapping out the afternoon, what we're calling the pod chunks, the freaking awesome podcast. So the first up is at 1 o'clock. We have Misery Point Radio. They've got a great introduction, and we're going to bring the Heavy Metal Thunder. Are you ready for the Heavy Metal Thunder? Because here it comes.
All right, guys, welcome back to Misery Point Radio. Thank you so much for joining us today on what is actually our first ever live stream for Misery Point Radio as part of the epic Indie Pods United Virtual Summit. So thanks to everybody on the summit for making this happen. And thanks, Jeff, for that epic introduction. And so now, if any of you are familiar with the show, you know that I like to talk to all of the artists, the entertainers, the musicians, the writers, the filmmakers, you name it, anybody who has creative awesomeness to share with the world. And today, we're going to talk with somebody who worked behind the scenes and saw all the crazy debauchery firsthand, and he's here to share some epic tales from the road with us. So please welcome to Misery Point Radio, Phil, the Burned Out Ex-Roadie. Phil, thanks for joining me today, brother.
Hey, appreciate being on.
Yeah. You know, it's actually kind of a really funny story how this whole thing even came to be, because, you know, I'm part of the Spoilerverse Network. And Phil works with some folks on the Spoilerverse Network as well. And one day on our Discord server, we were just kind of messing around, and I saw this really cool story about something, Phil, that you had shared. And I was like, dude, I got to have you on the show. And you were like, what show is that? And then I realized, because I hadn't learned everybody's screen names yet, I just thought you were like one of the Spoilerverse guys. And it turns out, nope, I'm just the dude that works here and hangs out and talks a bunch of stuff and shares awesome stories. And I was like, I don't give a F. You got to come on the show and talk about this awesome stuff. And now here we are, changing lives, one musical story at a time. So
that's right.
Let's dig into a little bit of the history then. Now, you refer to yourself as a roadie, or in some capacity were a roadie, but as I was talking to you, I realized from your perspective, that actually encompassed a lot of different job roles. You worked with a lot of bands in the music business as a tour manager, general manager, artist rep. So just kind of tell us a little bit about all those roles that you played at one point in time.
Yeah. So I actually a roadie, you know, is just kind of someone that goes out on the road. There's multiple roles that you can have out on the road. You know, like you can be a tech. I started as a tech. You can be a merch person. I also did merch. I was a stage manager. I was a tour manager. And I toured for around 7 years. I think it was like 2005-ish to like 2012-ish. And a huge majority of that was metal bands. I mean, Cephalic Carnage, Cal Decapitation, Morbid Angel, Prong, Soulfly, just a huge list. I mean, there's actually so many bands that I toured with there in that time, I can't even begin to remember, because as you can imagine, there's no shortage of excess out on the road. So, yeah. So, I mean, I just spent a lot of time out there. But like generally referring to when someone says a roadie, I mean, that could be a tour manager, that could be a tech, and then there's even within that, I mean, there's different levels, like you could be, the lowest level is just like a general tech hired on by like a company, where you don't have an assigned role, you're just there to help, and then it just goes up from there. And of course, like the highest level would be like the band's personal tech, like they are hiring you on personally and you're going out with them every single tour that they do.
Sure.
So.
And how did you get into that? I mean, what was your entry point?
Well, you're probably not going to like that I say this, but lie on your resume. So I was actually the director of a metal radio station, much like what you're doing right now. And so because of that position, I had contact with all the people at the different record labels. They were sending me their music, and getting their artists, in rotation and everything. So I kind of had an inside track, I guess. And then one of the guys that was running he just had like a marketing company. He expanded his company into doing production. And that's what you want to get into if you want to talk about going out on the road and everything, because it is production that you're going to be, that world that you're going to be joining. So he expanded into a production company, and I had already known him from working with the radio station, and I just hit him up with my resume one day. Hey man, and I was already doing local production. I was already working for all the local music venues. All the way coming up through being a child. I mean, I worked like in theaters, musical production, lighting, sound, doing that whole thing. So I was already in that role. So I just sent him an email and just lied to him, to be honest with you. I was like, hey man, I got all this local regional touring experience. And of course, by that I meant I had been out with a couple of my buddies' bands, like 2 or 3 states, and like, right. But I was like, hey, I can do this. Like, what role do you need? And he was like, well, and I guess he just received it at the right time, because it just so happened that he was looking for people to send out on tour. So, because he had just, started the new production part of the company and everything. And I think that the first tour I did, and I mean, we're talking slave wages. I mean, your first like 10 tours, you're just going to get treated like garbage. I think my first tour was like $250 a week. It was so low. I mean, that's $1,000 a month, which is below the poverty status. I mean, that's $12,000 a year.
Right.
And of course, they're going to pay for your lodging and your transportation, but like things like having things on a rider, I never had any of that. That's stuff that you graduate to. Like, There's a misconception. Like, you don't just enter the roadie world and then you get all this like stuff, and of course, through the years and everything, my pay went up. And I started actually making a lot of money, but, to begin with, I mean, no one's going to take it seriously. Like they're going to be like, yeah, we'll send you out there and we'll give you $200 a week and nothing on the rider. If that's a good deal for you, sure, come on out. Because at that point, they're not really losing anything. I mean, and it was just by virtue of a hard work ethic, like when I was on those first like couple tours, I was always the guy to go to for whatever. If the band needed something, hey man, Phil's going to take care of it. If someone else needed something, the tour management, I mean, even when I was working through companies, just having the ability to like pick up a band's payment at the end of the night and then properly deposit in the correct account, that's huge when they don't have someone to do that, or like properly doing stage management, getting a trailer unloaded, coordinating all the local stagehands that they'll have at the club, getting all the gear lined up, sound checking, And again, because I kind of had all this ability previous and I was already working in the industry, it kind of just really worked out. And at that point, it's true what they say though, like if you get on one tour, you absolutely, that's how, from that point forward, I mean, I never like begged or anything like that. I mean, it was one tour after another and they just kept assigning. And then like the artists, if you do a good job, I mean, there's such a huge amount of techs in the industry that just like get on the road and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to party and go crazy. And they do tons of drugs and all that sort of stuff, but they don't pay attention to the actual job. Like they're like crappy techs, like they're terrible guitar tech, but they just want to get, you know, messed up every single night and party with the band, you know? So like, if you're a good tech or you really like, you're the go-to guy, it gets recognized. You know, the bands are like, hey man, I had this great tech on this last tour and I know you guys are going out, man, give him a call. Here's his number, you know, and they'll do it like that. So,
yeah. So you did that for roughly, you know, 5 to 7 years. And just for point of reference, how long ago was this?
This would have been 2005-ish to 2012-ish. So anywhere between, you know, math is not my strong suit, but what is that? 8 years ago at the early point at 2012 is 8. And then 2005 is what, like 15 years ago. So
yeah, the moral of the story is if you want to get into being a roadie, your math skills don't have to be top notch.
Right. Yeah, that wasn't exactly something they tested us on. You know, when there wasn't like an entrance exam. You know, hey, solve this quadratic equation or anything. You know.
And just curious, speaking of timelines too, just because you happen to mention Morbid Angel, and I was curious if you even remember at this point, was this were you working with David Vincent Morbid Angel or Steve Tucker Morbid Angel?
David Vincent. It would have been 2011. So I did a tour with Divine Heresy where I met Tim Young. Right. And then Tim Young, of course, became the drummer for Morbid when Pete Sandoval, his back like went out and like just blew out and he had to like, you know, take a whole bunch of time. I think he like retired from, I don't even know what happened.
He found Jesus is the story I heard.
Well, maybe that's the case too, but originally
incompatible with their format.
Well, so here's the story, man. He hurt his back. He like threw his back out. I mean, like severely, like a skateboarding injury type of throw your back out. And no one knows how he did it, right? And then, of course, you know the things that go along with like that. You know, like you go to the hospital and what do they issue you? You know, something to help you.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? And then those, so that kind of like, you know, kind of took a hold a little bit, I guess. And then, so he was like in this weird up and down place. So then Tim Young took over drums for Morbid. And then it was after that you know, the come to Christ moment, like, you know, actually happened. But,
gotcha.
but I had known Tim, you know, I knew Tim. I was out with him. I was his drum tech, and you know, so you know, then the time came. He was out with Morbid, and we just kind of fell in place. So
yeah, right on. Well, so we talked a little bit then about some of the bands you've worked with. Of course, Morbid is one, and you mentioned Cattle Decap, by the way, whom I've seen live, and those guys are just piles of craziness and super cool dudes. So that being said, though, crazy stories from the road. I'm sure there are no shortages, but you'd sent me a couple of little snippets of some things that I thought was kind of cool. So I guess in no particular order, let's just kind of get a couple of these stories. Now, I was particularly interested in the first one that you'd sent over to me regarding somebody who may or may not have liked the food that they were served.
Yeah, and, that's the party story right there.
Well, so I know that maybe we don't want to necessarily go full on this individual's name, but this person is very well known, and I don't know if you want to drop any hints, but let's just tell people what happened with this delicious food.
So we'll just say that his last name begins with a D and it ends with a G. So you know, on writers, you're guaranteed a certain thing. You know, like the clubs have to either provide you a buyout or what's on your writer, and it has to be exact. You know, you hear all these crazy stories about like a bowl full of blue M&Ms and like artists flipping out. You know, if it's not blue M&Ms. So this artist, he had indicated that he wanted a plate full of ham in the green room, or I'm sorry, turkey in the green room. You know, because he wants sandwiches or something. I don't know, whatever else. And so we get to the club, the venue, you know, of course, and in the green room, the plate is ham, which of course is not turkey. It goes against what is on his writer, you know. So this guy, he proceeds to take a number 2 bathroom, you know, like a dookie, onto the plate of ham, you know, and then he runs around and he takes the ham that is now dookie covered and he sticks it up all over the green room on all the different walls. Just to voice his outrage.
What was the response to that, by the way? What did people do when he started smearing delicious defecation-covered food all over the place? Well,
I mean, you know, some artists are kind of known for acting out. So it's kind of like everyone in the room that is in the crew or the band or anything. They're just like, oh, geez, you know, here this goes again, you know. And then, of course, like the management for the club, they're going crazy because this is like they've never seen this in their life before. You know, so they come in there and they talk a bunch of garbage about kicking you out and how they're not going to put the show on and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, they're making a ton of money at that night from your act being there. So they're not going to do anything. I mean,
right.
You might have one that'll try to like call the police on you if you got really out of control. I mean, like if you're like running around destroying walls and stuff, I mean, they'll call the police on you. But if you're just doing something like that, you know, it'd be the same as like taking a bottle of, you know, like number one, like PP or something, you know, and like slinging it all over the room. I mean, yeah, they'll get pissed off, you know, but there's like levels of, you know, I mean, they're not going to like, they'll be like, oh, if you do this again, we're not going to have you on tonight. But it's like, dude, you're going to make, you know, $20,000-$30,000 tonight just from the people here to see this act. So like, you know.
Yeah, that's funny. And you had mentioned, since we're talking about bodily fluids, you know, why not? I mean, what more family friendly topic to live stream than that? There is a story about somebody maybe getting some acts performed on them while the person doing it might have some kind of a apparatus hooked up to themselves. Let's elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. All right. So that one, that is another really well-known guy. We're not going to mention his name because I can just see a huge slander lawsuit going from that one. But so, you know, when you're out on the road, there's you know, there's like super fans, and oftentimes they happen to be of the opposite gender. You know, we call them groupies. You know, so you know, sometimes the super fans are, you know, like willfully doing acts, you know, of debauchery. We'll just call it like, I don't know, like smoking a meat whistle or something, you know. That's what we'll call it. I mean, you guys know what I'm talking about. I mean, you know, we're playing the skin flute, you know, skin flute, you know. So there was this old like outhouse type of deal. It was like a photo booth inside the green room. And this person, he's of course, the groupie is doing her thing on his thing, you know, on his skin flute. And she has a coloscopy bag that is actually like, you know, I mean, it's a medical thing, you know, like people have them and stuff. And he's holding it. He's holding it up above her head and he's squeezing it as she's doing her thing, you know. And he's like, "Can you feel this? How about now? Can you feel this now?" And you know, of course, we all know what's inside that. So he's trying to squeeze it back into her body while she's doing her thing on his thing. Yeah.
Out of control for sure. Now, there's also a couple of rules in terms of when you're out on the road, especially in regards to tour buses. And you had a couple of cool tour bus stories, maybe about somebody who broke one of the cardinal rules and ended up maybe getting tossed off.
Yeah. So there's two rules on tour. One is you don't go number 2 in the toilet, and that's because you know, it just stays in there. It gets clogged up. There are modern tour buses that nowadays that you can pay to like have an extra system in there that'll break all that stuff up. Oh. And then the second rule is you respect people's space, you know, because when you're on a tour bus, your bunk, I mean, that's your holy space. I mean, it's 6 foot long, it's 18 inches high. You know, so it's kind of like your traveling coffin, you know, and like you put all of your toiletries and stuff, your toothbrush, all your personal stuff, you put in your little coffin there. And, you know, people are supposed to respect your space. And, man, you know, when you're on tour, you know, you try, it's just like customer service, you know, it's just like any industry, you know, you always try to like be gracious and courteous and stuff to the people you're working with and around, especially since you have to see them every day. But, you know, sometimes you just have falling outs. And in this case, in this particular instance, me and the drummer had a huge falling out, just a couple of them actually, like the whole duration of the tour, just, you know, at each other's throats and stuff. And then one day he decided to, he gets, you know, pissed drunk or something. And he ended up, you know, bringing a groupie back into my bunk to, you know, do the things that males and females do.
To do the deed.
Yeah, do the deed. And, you know, and he made sure that I had my toiletries and stuff in a bag, you know, like a little ditty kit or something. He made sure to empty it all out, and he was right on top of that, you know. And I was coming it was the end of the show. I was coming off the stage, and I was just going to my bunk to like grab something. And there's a Gatorade or something, you know, like between then and when I had to then load this trailer up. And of course, I see him in there in my bunk, you know, and I just like lost it. I mean, this is after the whole time we were on tour, just being at each other's throats. And so I just I grabbed his ankle, which was sticking out of my little bunk curtain, you know, and I just dragged him out of the bus and I threw him out into the road. Because I'm a big dude. I mean, I'm like 6'5". At the time, I was probably about 300. You know, so like, and he's a little European dude. You know, he's I don't know if you guys know this, but like European people are not as huge as American people. They're just their stature is less. You know, so like he was a little tiny dude, and I just picked him up by the ankle, slung him out into the road, and I was yelling and screaming the whole time. And you know, and then of course his friend, you know, she comes running off the bus, and she's just like in 10 seconds a mix of tears and makeup, you know, and then she starts going on about how her 5 children are going to miss her and that she needs to be home, you know, for dinner and everything. And I was the tour manager of that particular tour, and she just looks at me and she's like, "Oh, like, can you get me a cab?" You know, and I was just like, the audacity, like you just, I mean, granted, you know, it wasn't necessarily her fault. Like she didn't know exactly whose bunk it was or anything, but it was his fault. I was angry. Yeah. So she didn't get a cab ride home. No, I was like, no, you can walk. Like,
so sorry. She found her own lift.
I don't know what she did, but it wasn't on my.
Well, aside from all of the crazy stories, I mean, Phil and I could probably stay on here for hours talking about all this stuff, and if time permitted, I'm sure we would. But you know, in addition to all of the crazy stuff, there's just some actually kind of really cool, you know, feel good stories, you know, some cool things that happened to you. You got a chance to stay at Vinnie Paul's house while working with Prong on tour. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, so for that tour we were using, Vinnie Paul has his own, he owns or owned, partially owned like a busing company. Right. So that way, when he went out on the road, he didn't have to pay extra for the buses. He just would like pull them out of his garage, or, you know, he stored them somewhere. He'd pull them out. He wouldn't have to pay other than the gas to make them go, you know, because normally you have to rent them per day or per week. So they were his buses. They were actually the Kiss Tour buses from the Pantera videos that you guys that are everywhere. And Prong, you know, they're all Tommy Victor. I mean, he's old school. He's friends with all these guys. You know, he knows them all. So we were in Las Vegas, and he had just bought a house out there. And so, you know, we had a day off in Vegas, and he was just like, yeah, man, you know, come on by, you know, come chill at our house. So yeah, I mean, I think it was like 4 tour buses, but we all pulled up to his house. It's in a really nice neighborhood. It's a really nice looking place. Of course, I mean, you know, it's a decently priced house for that area. And, you know, so everyone cycles through, and it's like this cool experience. Like, oh, dude, it's Vinny. Like, you know, everyone grew up with Vinny, you know, and he's just as cool as can be, you know, like he doesn't care, you know, everyone's cycling through the showers and everything. And he had like this crazy steam shower thing going on. And at the end, you know, I was a tour manager. So I come out of the shower and I'm like, hey, Vinny, man, is there any way I could just get a ride to like a closest bank? Because, you know, I need to make this deposit, you know, so Prong can get paid, you know. And he throws me the keys to his new H3 Hummer. And he's just like, here you go, brother. And he's like, it's right down the right on the corner. And then he was like, oh, yeah, and tell me what you think about the music. And I get in the car, and like I'm like, you know, nerve-wracked, because I'm like, dude, this is Vinnie Paul's car. Like, if I mess this car up, I'm so boned, you know. Like, that's the story that everyone's going to know, you know. And right. So I turn the music on, and it ends up being the master copy of his unreleased Hell Yeah album. That was, you know, I mean, it's out now, obviously. This was many years ago, yeah. But like, exactly. But yeah, so I mean, it was just a cool thing. I get to ride in Vinnie Paul's, you know, and then weirdly enough, at the end of the night, man, he loved the 80s hair metal. And at the end of the night, we went to this local casino, and he was like, hey, man, you guys, let's all go, like, check out this hair metal band. We just watched this hair metal band play, and it was just cool because it was like, you know, here's Vinny, like, just right next to us, you know, like, we're just watching this hair metal band, you know, just random.
Yeah.
So, but there were a lot of good times, you know, like,
And with
I grew up
Prong
listening.
specifically, I just want to get into this Prong thing real quick because I'm a huge Prong fan. But didn't they also like bring you up on stage and sing "Happy Birthday" to you?
Yeah, that's actually the next thing that I was going to say is, yeah, we were in Canada on my birthday, and I didn't say anything, you know, I don't care, you know, but they had, I guess the company I was working through, the guy, he was like, oh yeah, you know, his birthday is this and whatever. So the whole band found out, and I was manning up the merch table between, because I think like our merch guy had to go do something or something like that. And yeah, you know, they called me up on stage, and yeah, Tommy Victor saying happy birthday to me. It was it's like a dream come true, especially when you grow up in that era, you know, like 80s, 90s, and seeing him on Beavis and Butthead and stuff, you know, and like, you know, and then you're like, dude, this guy is, and they brought me a birthday cake, you know,
Yeah.
That was just like, dude, what is this? Like, this is insane, you know? So.
Yeah, that's amazing. I was really big into Prong, especially like in the kind of the prove you wrong era, you know, that whole, you know, snap your finger, snap your neck, all that stuff. Those were songs that, I still to this day, I go back to that era, you know, we're talking about like the, you know, the New York hardcore scene, stuff like that, you know, and Prong, and they kind of were one of those bands that started to kind of cross over. They were, you know, kind of hardcore, kind of thrash, kind of had some power metal elements, but I was always a big fan of them. So I think that particular story I think is super cool because you always hear about how awesome the Prong guys are. I've heard it time and time again from people who have played with them over the years. So, well, all that being said, I mean, obviously there's some crazy stuff, but you know, you ended up getting out of it. So what brought you out of working in the music industry?
Man, so in the latter part of it, I was like only stage managing and tour managing. And at a certain point, man, I just started thinking, like, I was like, dude, they're just paying me a ton of money to be a babysitter. Like, these are grown people that are like, you know, partaking in huge amounts of drugs and all this sort of stuff on the weekdays and like during the regular days, you know. And I don't know, somehow I just started wanting, I used to actually, funny enough, now I work in like corporate America and everything, but I used to have hair down to my waist and like piercings and all sorts of stuff, you know. So I think at some point I just wanted to do better. I just wanted to reinvent myself and kind of, so I just distanced myself. I went back to college after I stopped touring and like got a bunch of degrees and all this stuff. And now I work in like a super corporate environment, but like, I don't think I could have asked for anything else because a lot of people, they don't make it out of that lifestyle. You know, it just kind of consumes them and, you know, so.
Sure. So is it fair to say, at least judging by your screen name, that maybe at a certain point you just kind of started to feel a little bit burned out and just didn't know what else there was in that industry for you?
Yeah, that's exactly it, actually. I mean, like, you know, and when you start doing tour management and stage manage it, like, that's the top of the post. You know, like, there is no position on a tour higher because at that point you're balancing the budget, literally. I mean, between the company, you know, the record label, like you are balancing a budget for them. You're responsible for paying people. I mean, like, and it was great. I mean, it taught me a ton of stuff, but like at a certain point and after doing that for a long time over and over again, you know, it just gets old.
Sure. Yeah. Well, have you ever thought about just kind of randomly is something that maybe you would do again on a one-off or a two-off as kind of a favor to a friend in the industry or anything like that?
So I've definitely thought about it. I mean, I definitely, I still keep in touch with a lot of those guys, like, you know, Cattle Cap. They're awesome, man. I mean, like the drummer, Dave. I mean, he's great. Like, yeah. Josh. I mean, all of them. So, I mean, I've definitely thought about it over the years. I've definitely been like, oh man, you know, if you guys come through, you let me know, and I'll just hit you up and stuff. And I've seen, you know, a couple of them, like as they come throughout the years, they'll play at like a local club or something, and I'll hit them up. Hey man, put me on the list, and we'll hang and chill out backstage or something like that. But like, you know, I mean, I have a house now, and you know, married and everything. And
sure,
I don't think I would go back to that lifestyle. I mean, it was very fast. It was very like crash coursey, you know, like. And I think I just I crave the stability that I have now and that I've created over the years. Yeah. So I don't know if I'd go back to it.
Well, we're just about out of time for the day, but I'm going to throw one last question at you, and it's going to be just a super quick answer. Okay. So of all the artists you work with, if you had to pick one, who was your favorite?
Probably Soulfly. And that's only because out in Arizona, they all live out there, like all the brothers and sisters and everything. And so I was out with Soulfly and Igor and Andreas. They made like a guest appearance, and it just turned into a 2-hour Sepultura set with all of the original members. So it was like, that was just so memorable. and they're really gracious people. You know, just like Max, you know, hanging with them, you know, they're always like, they'll never hold anything against you, you know, if you're new or anything like that. They're just really super chill people.
Right on. Well, that sounds awesome. Soulfly's killer. Sepultura, of course, huge influence on me, myself. I absolutely love that.
Of course.
So,
of course.
You know, Phil, I want to thank you for doing this impromptu session today, for coming and hanging out on Misery Point Radio, for taking part of the live stream,
Yeah, no
and
worries.
just for kind of entertaining us with the stories. I'd like to leave the door open, have you come back on sometime. We can really dig into some crazy stories, then maybe in a little bit different format, and kind of not worry about some of the, you know, P's and Q's and stuff. But this has been awesome. Your stories are great, and we have so many more that we just didn't get to. So thanks again for hanging out here and giving us your time and sharing your experience with us. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me, and I'm definitely open to that invitation. So
all right, well, thanks again, and we'll talk to everybody else soon on Misery Point Radio. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for bringing the heavy metal thunder. I told him all week I was going to say heavy metal thunder.
And you did it.
I delivered heavy metal thunder. I hope you were ready for that. Thank you so much for joining us today at Indie Pods United. We're going to keep it moving. We have our next show coming up, the Soul Forge podcast. I'm going to go ahead and switch everybody around here.